All right. Hi, everyone. Well, before I start talking about that, I'm just going to say a couple of words about what I'm doing normally. You know, and so I'm a PhD student at CNMAT at Stanford, and I've been working with Faust for probably more than 5 or 6 years, and where I contributed to some things that people are using now, like the Faust SDK or the Faust online compiler, the Android architecture of Faust. And during the last 3 years, I've been teaching Faust workshops at CNMAT, but also outside of CNMAT, and mostly in America in general. So not only in the United States, but also in Central America and in other places. So this talk is about, you know, just talking about my experience teaching Faust, you know, and try to evaluate a little bit this experience and see if it can be useful, you know, to maybe, you know, improve things or keep things or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of the idea. So Faust is very present at CNMAT, since Julius is one of the main Faust contributors, Julius Smith. So there is not a class at CNMAT that is specifically designed around Faust, but we have a series of classes where professors are using Faust and encouraging students to use Faust for their final projects and different things. So, for example, we have an introductory class to computer music that has been using Faust for a couple of years. Mobile music applications with Wong and also Julius Smith, who really encourages students to use Faust to do their final projects for the different signal processing classes. But there is not really a class that gives a broad introduction to Faust and that is really centered on Faust. Yes, so we had Faust workshops at CNMAT for 3 years now, since July 2013. Faust workshops are 5 days long, so it's 1 full week, and they are pretty intense because it's 7 hours a day. So we start at 9 a.m. in the morning, and we pretty much work until 5 p.m. in the afternoon with a small break for lunch. So it's really, really, really intense, both for the students and also for the instructor. But the main idea around the workshops is to introduce students to Faust, but also to signal processing in general. So when the workshops are advertised, they are not really advertised as Faust workshops, but more as signal processing workshops. But Faust is the mean that we're using to implement the different objects that are created during the workshop. So the main idea is to give an intuitive understanding of the algorithms to the students. So we basically try to avoid math as possible, and as much as we can, because we have students with very, very, very different backgrounds. So in general, we put an enrollment limit of 15 students because there are actually more than 50 students who apply every year to take the workshop. So we have a small admission process, and through that we kind of make sure that people will understand the very basic things we will talk about during the workshop. But we had high school students, actually very smart high school students, but also with engineers, Google, Apple engineers who took those workshops, you know, along with high school students. So that was actually pretty challenging because having high school students and very top computer scientists in the room is a little bit complicated to handle in some situations. But we also had professors. We had Stanford and also Berkeley students, so grad students in general. yeah, just people with very, very different profiles, and also artists, of course, who are interested in that kind of things. So during the week, students get a full access to Karma and to the facility in general. So they get access to the recording studios and everything, and yeah, that's pretty nice. So one small detail I want to add is that those workshops are not free. Because, well, you know, it's nothing is free in the United States. So, but they are not very expensive though. It's only $500 a week, which might sound totally crazy for European standards, but it's relatively cheap for workshops in the US. But that may be a limiting factor in some sense though, because even though the workshop itself is not very, very expensive, we have students who come from the other side of the world, literally, and those guys have to pay for hotel, they have to pay for their flights, and also for well, the registration fee, and at the end can get pretty expensive. So for these workshops, I've been using a wiki during the week. So every day I would post the code that we worked on. So maybe if I do that, you can get the address. But for each workshop, we had a small URL here. You know, so 2013 is 2013, you know, and 2014 here, and we also had a version for 2015, and yeah, the wiki is basically run on the Karma server, and every day I would just like add code, the code that we studied during the day. So just to give you a brief overview of what we did, so you see that we have 5 days. So I'm showing you the 2014 version here because I'll talk about the 2015 version, which was a little bit different a little bit later. But in 2014, we actually managed to do all these things in 1 week. So it's really, really intense. So it's really a crash course, basically. So the idea, you know, is to give students as much material as possible during the week, make the code available, you know, and I don't really expect students to understand everything in 1 week because that's really a lot of informations. But then it's very easy for them, you know, to get in touch with me, and they actually do. So then during the rest of the year, very often I get emails from students who took the workshop during the summer, and also those students become very active members of the Faust mailing list. And for example, for this year, I'm thinking about Daniel Shapiro, who's been asking a lot of questions on the Faust mailing list during the last 3 months. But yeah, on day one, we basically start with very basic fundamental things about signal processing, which people need to know if they want to be able to understand the different algorithms that are presented during the rest of the workshop. But by the end of the first day, a simple panner and simple additive synthesizers are implemented. Then we get into more complicated things. You know, yes.
Do you give the source code as a file or they type it?
So that's a good question. So I type it and I just walk students through the code. Like so we basically write the code together, and then we have small exercises for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. You know, where students try to you know, make small improvements or small changes to the example code that we studied, and then at the end of the day, I post the code on the wiki, and that way, after their 7 hours of class, you know, those very brave guy can continue study at home or at the hotel until very late at night, until we start again. Well, actually, in practice, it's not really what happens because part of the registration fees is used to buy beer and you know, soft drinks, and so we actually usually go to restaurants after the workshop, you know, and we do that every day, you know, and that's that's also a good way to create some kind of network and to encourage people getting more interested in that. I'm saying that because in California it's very, very common, that beer and classes are mixed together, and I think it's great. Anyway, so. So day 2 we do delays, and we start implementing filters, feed-forward filters, so no recursion, no feedback, and so by the end of the second day, they should have some kind of low-pass and high-pass filter, and that they can use. On day 3, we study feedback, and therefore we can implement flanger with feedback, echo, and small carpool-strong algorithm. Last year, students were a little bit better than in 2014, so we could actually go faster, and so we were able to do a small physical modeling session at the end of the day after studying carpool-strong algorithms, because that's kind of the introductory algorithm to physical modeling. On day 4, we implement a small simple cubic distortion, then resonant bandpass filters, parametric equalizer, and in the afternoon vocoder. So that's, I know it sounds a lot, and it is a lot, but I don't know. At the end of the workshop, I try to make some kind of evaluation to see if students, actually understood what I said, and I think for most people, it's actually fine. So, but usually we get very, very good people. So it's totally possible. And then on day 5, a reverb. So we literally re-implement free verb, and then a compressor in the afternoon. So for each algorithm, I provided students with a link to Julius's website. So for those of you who are not familiar with this website, Julius. I know, wait, that's not what I wanted to do. So Julius wrote a series of books on signal processing that you can buy, but that are also freely available on his website. So if you go on his website, I'm sure most of you are familiar with that because they are really like state-of-the-art signal processing books. But the nice thing about them in the frame of the workshop is that they provide the mathematical background that is missing during the workshop. So if students want to go further and learn more about the theory behind the algorithm that we study, they can just use the book basically, and that's very nice. By the way, Julius is working on making online courses that are based on these books and also based on the classes that he's giving at Karma, and we thought about maybe making something similar with a Faust workshop, but then we realized that it's actually a lot of work. Just to give you an idea, Julius has been I see that Alex is laughing, because Julius was extremely busy with that. But last year, Julius created a Coursera course based on the 320 class, which is the Introduction to Signal Processing class that he's giving at Karma in fall quarter. And 17,000 students enrolled across the world, and so even though probably 90% of them were, just enrolled to be enrolled, and to check it out, there were still probably 10% of them who were like asking questions and really engaging in the class, So that's more than 200 or 300 students to take care of, and I know that Julius spends like nights replying to emails of students who are on the other side of the world. So that's something that they were not really prepared for, and so we don't really want to have to deal with that, at least for now. Well, I don't want to have to deal with that. So in terms of what I was asking students for before the workshop, you know, in terms of what they had to install, like we did everything in Faust Live. So Jan showed you Faust Live this morning, so I don't have to do that again this afternoon. But the only two elements that I was asking students to install prior to the workshop were Faust Live and the Faust compiler. And with that, we were like totally good to go. So we're not using Faust Works because the installation process is a little bit more, well, I wouldn't say complicated, but on some platforms sometimes you have to take care of some small details. You know, and Faust Live is great because it's directly linked to the online compiler and to the Faust web service. So students don't have to install any dependency on their computer, and they can just go for it. And that's
so they bring their own, or do you provide?
They bring their own laptop, but I really require a student to install Faust Live and the Faust compiler before they come to the workshop, and I make sure that they do it, and so they do it, you know, and Faust Live is great because, you know, there is an installation package, so there is no dependency, no compilation problems, you know, so that's great, and I think every time most of the students had Apple computers, so that was kind of making things easier too. And last year we had one Windows user, which became kind of problematic at some point, but I'm not going to talk about that for now. But and I think we had two Linux users, and all the other guys were Apple users, which was nice because in terms of maintenance and yeah, that was really great.
So, but you spend maybe some 1 hour at the beginning to just make sure that everything is installed correctly?
Yes. So what I do is that I ask all students before the workshop to do a test and to return me the result of the test. You know, and if they don't do it, then I bug them with emails until they do it. Mm. And that's and that works. Like this year, everyone had Faust running before they arrived, so we actually didn't have to do that, and that you save a lot of time doing that. That's great, and I think it's only really possible to do that with Faust Live because you know, there is the installation package, everything is very well documented, and so just works right away. So as you saw on the table of contents here, we only study algorithms that are working in the time domain, of course, because, well, not only because it's Faust, but also because it's easier to understand for students in only 1 week. So we only work on algorithms that are working in the time domain, and we also kind of avoid algorithms that will require more mathematical understanding. Like, I'm thinking about a phasor, for example. Like, the difference between a flanger and a phasor is very small, but it's very easy to intuitively understand how a flanger works. Well, a phasor, it's probably better to have the mathematical background that comes with it. So that's how I was kind of trying to slide between complexity and to not do too much math. Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna carry on that. So that's for the Faust workshops. But we also exported Faust workshops outside of the U.S. With a version of this workshop that happened in Costa Rica. That was awesome. That was great. So I got invited there by one of the students of the workshop from the previous year, you know, and that was very interesting because I realized that in Central America there is actually a huge community of people doing computer music, and especially with Linux. And I never heard of them before, but there were a lot of people. So that was part of the festival and some kind of music technology conference where there were 200 people, and the organizer of the conference was complaining that there were not enough people. And then I told him, well, you know, that's actually pretty good just for Costa Rica, and so most of the students were from Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, and some people came from South America, but just a few. And yeah, that was great because the organizer planned like a trip to the beach, as you can see. You know, that was that's very good for motivating troops. Yes. All right, so for the 2015 version, we filmed everything, and so we're actually trying to make some kind of online course based on the workshop. So the videos are being posted on YouTube. I'm not completely done with that. I tried to finish that last week, but that was too much encoding because that's like hours and hours of video, and it's not very fun to take care of. So I hope that by the end of this month, this will be posted, and so there will be an online version of the workshop, and I think that will be great to maybe replace some of the older Faust tutorials that are on YouTube that I made in 2011 or 2010. Some of them are a little bit outdated, and there are new things. So I think it would be nice to have them pretty soon. Yes. So another thing that we've been doing at Karma during the past 3 years were Faust days. So Jan was at the first one in 2013, I think. Yeah, that was probably 2013. And then I took care of the 2014 version, 2015 version. But the idea was to have a one-day.
You can re-invite me.
Oh yeah. I know. Well, it's just that like the last 2 years we're like, well, are we doing it? Are we not doing it? You know, and then 3 weeks before we do it, we're like, okay, let's do it. You know, but yeah, I could invite you this year, like so. So the idea is to give a workshop in the weekend only for one day. It's a very intensive workshop, and it's targeted for everyone who lives in the Bay area, the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'd say that maybe a third of the students are Karma students or Stanford students, and then at least for the last 2 years, the two other thirds were mostly engineers from companies in the Silicon Valley, and that was great because it means that the industry is actually interested in Faust. And last year we had 50 students, and we did that in the Karma classroom, which is not designed for 50 students, and so it was very packed. Very, very hot, but that was very nice to see that people in the industry are actually interested by Faust. So we've seen people from well, in the attendees there were people from Apple, Google, Isotope, Dolby, Sennheiser. Who else? Smule, Shazam, Mac DSP. So just like a lot of companies, and there were even 2 guys from Google. So that's well, it's just good to see that Faust is interesting people on that side of the.
Do you know the motivation they had to come, or?
Well, I kind of tried to ask them, and so I. Most of the answers that I got from them were that they were really interested in the C++ generated by Faust, you know. So I don't think they really cared about architectures or like all the higher level part of Faust, you know. But really, I think they just wanted to see how maybe they could use Faust to generate C++ code, you know, and maybe to make their workflows simpler or easier. But what I noticed, though, is that most of them were coming there on their own. Like they were not. They were just taking a day of break from work. And because most of those guys that are working in these companies, they are musicians. And they play music, and they are and they like doing that kind of stuff. So they were not sponsored by their company to come see that kind of things. But then I'm sure that some of them are. Well, I know that at Google, some people are now like using Faust to do prototyping. I know that Hongchen, for example, is using Faust to do prototyping for web audio and that kind of things. But it's pretty hard to really know, I guess. But after conversations and a lot of beer, we managed to know that in more details a little bit. And the last session, because I noticed that from the year before, but I really emphasize the use of the C++ code, basically. Because I know that's what people were interested in. And so we really study the C++ code and see how the C++ code can be used outside of Faust to create something else. All right. So evaluation. So I think we reached a point where we don't really need to advertise the workshops anymore, which is great because the first year we actually had to do a lot of advertising to get the 15 students, but now we don't really have. Well, I just post one thing on the Karma website, and people just come. So it means that there is interest for Faust, at least in Northern America, which is good. In terms of diversity, because that's always the big question. But last year we had 15 students, 2 women. So that was better than the year before, where there were no women at all. Well, to be honest, I didn't really try to do anything to make this better. But maybe for next year, I might try to do what Fernando Lescano-Lopez has been doing for his workshop on Super Collider the last 2 years, which is providing a scholarship for women in computer music. So and it worked very well for Nando, because for his Super Collider workshop he actually got 30 applicants. So it means that it's probably a good way to maybe engage more women in that kind of things.
You mean like in a club?
What?
You mean like in a club or a discotheque?
For yes. Yes. Pretty much, yeah.
Scholarship sounds better though.
Yeah, I think scholarship is better. Yes. So Faust has been a really great tool for teaching DSP, and I kind of noticed that people who don't have any background in programming are a little bit better at learning Faust than people who don't, or at least people who've been doing DSP in C++ and MATLAB for 10 years. Those are it's too late. So, no, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's easier, I think, for people who never programmed DSP before to learn Faust, because they are not too contaminated by the imperative programming languages thing, and the functional paradigm works very well, I think, for signal processing. So that's definitely a good thing. Faust Live made my life much easier for the last 2 versions of the Faust workshop, and I really thank Sarah for that, because that was a big change. the ability to visualize block diagrams was crucial, I think, during the whole process. The fact that students can code and then visualize block diagrams is very very important. So that's I mean, those two things work very well together. But I guess that anyone who taught Faust knows that, so I'm not going to insist too much about it. Then on Faust itself, I think maybe one thing that is missing for people who want to do more advanced applications is debugging tools, but for signal processing. I'm not talking about debugging tools for the language itself, because those are kind of, well, they are probably good enough, or maybe they could be improved in some ways. But so I'm not talking about debugging the code, but I'm talking about debugging the algorithm. So Judith showed you this morning that there are options, with Faust to plot, and the ability to export the samples or the result from a Faust object to MATLAB, and then plot those different things. But it's not very practical, because, well, first you need MATLAB, or you need Octave to be installed on your computer, and Octave can be complicated to install on Linux, and it's very very big, and all that at the end just to plot a graph or do a simple FFT. So I think that we could probably make better tools to debug the signal processing part of the Faust object. So maybe better debugging tools for that.
Do you have any specific idea? Or?
I'm not really sure, actually. I don't know, but maybe just try to package the tools that are provided in Octave in some kind of standalone application that would go right next to. Because I mean, I think what most of the people do is just plot the waveform, then like zoom in.
Real-time scope, which you can just put anywhere into the signal path. That would be nice there.
Zoom in, zoom out, and then FFT. Yeah,
exactly. Then you can see what's going on.
And then that's already, because I don't think that people do more than that at the end. So.
So do you mean in the code to place some special instruction identity function that
right.
call for?
Right.
Yeah.
So it should be possible to just go in there and. I mean, for parts which aren't actually compiled because they are optimized the way, you can do it obviously. But anything you see in the flow graph, in the block graph, which gets generated, should be accessible in some way, so you can just put a scope to it.
Yeah,
that would be. I don't know what's the best way to do it, but that's
so the thing is, I think what's really important is the first 100 or like 200 samples, because I mean there are tools that already, like Badline, for example, where in Jack you can run Badline. It's a spectrum analyzer that you can. But then like if you really want to look at the first 100 samples, for example, or maybe the first 1,000 or 10,000 samples, you can't really do that with something in real time because that's too fast, basically. And so.
Do you think, let's say, a kind of step-by-step strategy could help in development?
Yeah.
For example, sending a bunch of samples, looking at the result, and sending the next one, and so avoiding bypassing the real-time stuff and in a given way, or doing things like you're doing a regular debugger and the signal step by step.
It's difficult.
Do you think that could help?
I've tried that with some stuff with Octave, and but using the pure Faust loader inside Octave, and just stepping through, but you don't see much. Either you want a snapshot or you want to have a rolling display.
Yeah.
With frequency analyzer, that you see whether the filter does what it should and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, maybe we can talk about that later, but I think there are definitely options, and I have like two last points before I thank you all. But one thing that I heard, and I told you, Jan, about it, but especially from the industry side. Being able to generate fixed point C++ code could be probably of interest for some people just because cheap DSP chips are using fixed points and not floating points. And so I know that it's not a very easy things to do, but it's just that I actually had this question asked several times, like by people who are like, yeah, we're making stump boxes and we're using fixed points DSP chips, and can you generate fixed points C++ code in Faust? And I'm like, no, you can't really do that. Just get a floating point DSP chip. And so yeah, that's another thing. And then to conclude, and Jan mentioned that this morning, I think just a good collaborative and good exchange platform, like to share codes from everywhere around the world, like is something that would be really, really important and very interesting, especially because Faust is probably one of the only programming language where you can somehow maybe create a separation between the technical side of things and the very, very high level part of things. So some kind of exchange platform, where musicians just take the thing and they use it, and that's it. Like they don't have to deal with code, they don't have to deal with patching or whatever, and so I think there is definitely some work to do on that. But I'm already late, so thank you very much, and yeah.